Hello and welcome again to the Cycle Breaker Parents Unite podcast. Today, I have a really wonderful guest who's going to help us out by sharing some more information on an area of, well, parenting and neurodiversity and wonderful humans, wonderful humans that I think previously I say children, but children grow into adults, haven't had their needs met in mainstream society. And one element of cycle breaking is to meet our child where they're at and to support our child in the ways that they need, not in the ways that other people say, not in the ways that mainstream society tells us to do things, or, a random person on the street tells us what to do with our kids, but actually to meet and love and get to know our kids and then to support them. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Nicola Reekie, who runs the PDA space, which supports children and families with children with PDA. So hi, Nicola.
Hi, Laura. Thank you for that.
First off, could you please explain to us what is PDA? Because it's three simple letters, but it's such a big thing, isn't it, to unpack?
Huge. It's massive. So yeah, PDA stands for pathological demand avoidance. And there's a lot of debate about should that be the term, but it was coined that back in the 80s by Elizabeth Newsom, and it's a profile of autism. And, it's an interesting one because some of the autistic traits are there, but some of them are really quite different. So very often, parents will see from a very young age, but be perhaps told that it's because they're young, that the young person will resist and avoid ordinary demands. So, that can be eating, getting dressed, going to places. You think of anything that you expect your child or young person to do, very often they will avoid. Then they'll use amazing social strategies as part of this avoidance. And I'll explain, I'll share a bit of our story to help in a moment. They very often will appear sociable, and they really, which can often confuse professionals and others because they are so sociable, but actually it's only on the surface. Very often there's no perhaps inner depth.
I think it often goes unnoticed or until a lot of things pile up. And I say this is as a mom and as many people will know this, listen to this, that I used to be a class teacher in primary schools. There's a lot of misdiagnosis about, isn't there? And that means children not getting support. Misdiagnosis is not a hollow term, but it's a friendly term. It doesn't really mean anything. But in real life, that means children not getting support and families struggling to support their children without guidance, isn't it?
Absolutely. So this appearing sociable throws everybody because they feel that they're not autistic, but they're very often their interests will be person-centered, which very often other autistics may not have. So they may have a real special interest in a person, if that's somebody physically close to them, or on social media, wherever. And that really can throw. They're also really comfortable in role play and pretense, and that can change from very young age all the way up to adults. And again, I can share experiences. However, I've held 2 online PDA summits, and adult PDA is sharing how even now that role play comes out in a different way. And there's a need for control, which is often driven by high anxiety and autonomy and needing that autonomy.
You see, I think that might be an area where control is one of those key words, and because it's all this whole podcast and what I do is all about cycle breaker parents, and I say traditional society, like mainstream society in the 80s, 90s, even noughties, parenting is a lot about control. And it's I've had people say to me in the street when my I say neurotypical, but I don't know what that term even means. But, without extra needs, children have, say, refused to do something in a shop, or they've said no or whatever. And somebody who I don't know has leaned over and said, oh, well, I wouldn't give in to that demand. And that mainstream parenting, it actually doesn't suit most children. But if you have a child with PDA, diagnosed or not, because I think a lot of people will be listening to this and going, aha, that might be my kid. But if we drop into that place of power play, that's when conflicts arise, isn't it? Because it really, really doesn't suit particularly PDA children to say, actually, no, I do have control over you here, because it will just exacerbate the whole issues, won't it?
Absolutely. But the anxiety can come out in various different ways as well, the aggression or upset. Also, they don't see the hierarchy, which can then cause a lot of problems within school, that they won't see the head teacher or the class teacher as, they see them as equals. And then therefore the language as well in that scenario. And a tendency, as you just said, not to respond to conventional parenting or approaches. So, the traditional parenting styles are not going to necessarily work. So just to sort of share a little bit about our situation, because those are all very sort of dry statements.
Yeah.
So when my son was little, so under 3, I remember how difficult it was just to get him out and in a buggy. But I also remember once he hit, say, 5, 6, 7, because I think when they're under 3, people say, well, it's the terrible twos, or they're sort of finding their feet, they're finding that sort of balance.
Yeah.
But 5, 6, 7, certain foods, I remember giving him a bar, it was broken. He just literally, had a meltdown, couldn't cope with that, or broken fish fingers. Just really struggling. And
that can, sorry, if you don't know what's going on, that's quite scary, isn't it? I imagine as a parent, it's, all children do that sometimes, but when it's over things that we can't understand
consistently. Yeah, and it was just really like, the food's there, it's just in 2 parts, or, the fish fingers got half of the edging off. And it just meant that it felt like we were all constantly walking on eggshells, never quite knowing when the next explosion would be. The role play, when he was under 5, he did a lot of play with Playmobil or Lego, but Playmobil and the army people. And the police. So really sort of playing out those scenarios, and it'd be the same scenario. As he's now older, it's football. And I was thinking about this the other day, thinking, well, he doesn't really do role play. And then I was listening to him. He plays FIFA, and his role play is actually as if he is a YouTuber, even though he's not recording himself. He sounds like he is, so he's in role.
Oh. I wonder if there'll be parents. This is why I wanted to get you on the podcast, is for people to access, like the PDA space. That's going to be mostly people who identify with that. My child has PDA, or even I am a PDA. So some people hopefully will be listening to this and going, yes, my kid does that, or I did that, and then realizing, because I think there's a whole element. I have been thinking about this a lot, of why I think I seem to attract a lot of neurodivergent people. And I think it's because I talk about when we adults, we the parents, weren't acknowledged for who we were as children, because special needs and understanding of autism and PDA and, well, neurodivergence, that wasn't a word in 1985, was it?
No,
we didn't know about it. Yeah, and we've kind of moved on. But if you are a parent who has PDA or has autism that is undiagnosed, you may be seeing yourself in your child, and then there's that grief element of, I never had my needs met, and I realize how important it is. And actually, we can break the cycle for ourselves. It heals ourselves by supporting our children, doesn't it? In that way.
I think a lot of parents start understanding their own neurodivergence as they go along, if it's ADHD, autism PDA.
I absolutely have had that with so I'm dyslexic, and my daughter is going through the process of diagnosis classification, and I'm just seeing all of the ways that I behaved, but then I didn't find out till I was 27, and I actually had to seek, well, not had to, I got to seek support from somebody for my own feelings of grief that I didn't have that, that support that I needed, but I can give it to her. So actually, for some people, the PDA space will be something that helps their child and themselves, which I think is so special. I was going to ask you, do you have advice? Sorry.
Because obviously I'm also dyslexic and dyspraxic and waiting an ADHD assessment. So what I was going to say about the role play is it can really change. And I think when they're young, perhaps they'll be playing with soft toys and you'll think, oh, that's quite sweet, but they'll keep acting out situations. And it goes on. Also, this social mimicry to get out of a situation. So we'd say, well, let's go out for a walk. Let's all go on Sunday afternoon to go out together. And then my son would say something like, oh, my legs don't work. I can't do that. And you'd be like, well, they do. We often wouldn't necessarily see what I would classify as naughty behaviour, but I felt like I was in the middle of a circus. So there'd be little behaviour going around to distract, to stop, which is the social mimicry, to create an unbalance, to stop us from going and doing whatever it was. And I'll never forget the day after his assessment, we had to go quite a long way away from where we live, stayed and had a holiday in a campsite nearby. And we went swimming the next day. And I was asking him about swimming lessons that had happened at school. That was a demand. He didn't like it. We were playing catch with a ball and you've just thrown it in my face. And I was like, I didn't. But it was his way. He didn't feel comfortable. So he created a big scenario to manipulate and change. And it's also parents, I don't use the word manipulate anymore, but at the time I felt really manipulated.
Yeah.
But it's about changing that scenario. But that manipulation, I remember for years saying, if it's not his way, I feel quite manipulated. But obviously, if you don't feel in control and you feel very anxious, that is what they may do.
I guess it is actually, when you think about it, it's kind of an adaptive strategy if you're overwhelmed by the world to try and do things that make you feel safe. It's a way of, or you may not know, but I do, in the Turning Point, when I work with parents, the Turning Point is my program, we use the structure of polyvagal theory, and the safe, and then the fight or flight, and then the dorsal vagal, like the complete breakdown, curled up in a ball kind of stage. And we find adaptive ways of understanding when we're in fight or flight, and then moving ourselves towards, this is the learning, moving ourselves towards the social and the calm stage. But if you don't have any skills and you don't understand the world because you have a neurodivergent, you're going to do whatever you can to claw your way back to safe. And that might mean, for some people, like having control. And unfortunately, the rest of the world watching that is going to be like, oh, that's manipulative. And I know people often talk about small children, particularly maybe the older generations, about, oh, they're manipulating you. Or I remember people saying that to me with my eldest when we were breastfeeding, and they're saying, oh, she's just manipulating you by crying. And actually it's not. I know, but that's their way of calling out for us. And a child who has extra needs may well present as, that's the thing, isn't it? They're presenting as manipulative behaviours, and actually they're not. It's a cry for help. And absolutely, skilling up for us as parents helps us to meet that need. And then I'm guessing, and you'll know much more than me, does that alleviate it or lessen the...
It can lessen it. And it's all, I mean, I don't really discuss it anymore, but we saw a lot of aggressive behaviour. And I ran a Facebook group, and one person said, oh, but you know, PDAs are aggressive. And I was like, no, they're not aggressive, but we're all aggressive if we don't feel safe.
Yes, yes. And if your safety mechanism is tweaked quickly, then you're more, I understand, more aggressive.
You know, and we all, as adults, have learned different ways. You know, we may not be physically aggressive, but we'll find a way of, if we're stuck and feel trapped in a corner, a way around that if we don't have the skills and techniques. So the way we've changed our parenting, and the way that a lot of parents, to create calm, and there'll always be challenges, is to reduce demands, changing language to be non-directive, looking at sense.
What does that mean?
I'll come back to that. And looking at sensory demands, as well as you say, looking at how we respond, how we cope, how we react. And you know, there are always going to be times. We have 2 children, one who is possibly ADHD, so very loud, very, you know, his way of balancing himself is being quite verbal. So watching a movie, that triggers his brother who's got PDA, you know, and you can't tell the other person not to talk because that's their need. So there's always, but it's how will you manage it, and how you accept it, and how you talk about it.
Yeah.
So changing language to be non-directive. So you have a person that perhaps you need to get to school, or you need to get them to do something. When they're younger, you perhaps would say, which pair of shoes, your black shoes or your trainers? Or if they're in a place where there's only one pair of shoes, or where are you going to put them on? Are we putting them on here in the stairs or by the front door? And it's looking at how you can just tweak your language so it's not a demand. But I mean, I've done webinars on demands for an hour, because, you know, there's hidden demands, unseen demands. They're really
and often we don't know we're doing it as parents, do we? And we're tired. And we can do the best we can do.
Even when we do, I mean, you know, I said something the other day of to my son, because he's a teen, oh, it's getting late, and he said, I know what you're doing. And I said, sorry, what do you mean? He said, well, you're telling me to go to bed. I said, I didn't tell you to go to bed. And using you know, a plan B solution, which they need to be over sort of 7 or 8, to say, this is the situation, how can we unpick? So when my son first, when my son first started high school, he's got a school bus. In the first week, you know, would be on his phone watching stuff, because he obviously, the anxiety was getting higher, and his way of coping. And I'd quietly sort of say, oh, come on, you know, we've got this much time. Anyway, on one of the days, he missed the bus. It went. And I was like, that's cool, that's brilliant, that's fine, don't, you know, I can drive you. Lots of smiles, and didn't say anything at that point, you know, just kept on. I think I was asking about the YouTuber or whatever he'd been watching. Later that day or the next day, I said, what could we do differently? What could you do?
That's so great. Explain, like talking it through at a different time. That's when they're able, they're calm and they're not stressed out. It's wonderful.
Well, also, even though I put a smile and was like, it's okay, there is a bit of like, well, I've wanted, you know, I wouldn't say, but I wanted to tell you, if you don't get ready, you're going to be late. And I think it just takes the tension away, and you're not under a time limit. Because
you're a team.
Yeah, but even I think, you know, I've done it through since he was about 8 or 9, and he made the choice. He put an alarm in that was the time to go and brush his teeth, get his shoes on, and get ready. He has dropped that alarm now, but he, you know, but he had that control. He came out with the decision.
You supported him to make his own decisions to change that situation, and that's very empowering.
Yeah.
And actually, I imagine people hopefully are listening to this as well and thinking, well, my child isn't PDA, you know, if they're not, but actually that would really help me with my child, because, you know, as with all of these things, and certainly my experiences when I was in the classroom and even with my children, is that when we put in place things that support the neurodivergent children, they benefit all children. But if we don't, if we kind of teach or talk or aim to the non-neurodivergent people, then we actually exclude all the people who can't access that. So actually being inclusive supports everybody, doesn't it? It's great.
Absolutely. And I mean, we could talk for hours, and I know that, you know, we haven't got that time today, but it's also looking at different ways of communicating. You know, it may be, I've got loads of whiteboards indoors, that just perhaps writing a couple of things. And it's really about changing, as a parent, our beliefs and expectations as well. So, you know, I was brought up on this really strict thing of everybody ought to sit around, you know, the table together for a meal. And for us, letting go of that, and for a long time, my son would eat his meal out at the breakfast bar while we were in the other room sitting around the table. And, you know, letting go of those beliefs. Now he does sit with us, because there is the other problem, as I say, we have two children who have different needs and different impulses. And so he is now back sitting, but obviously when he wants to talk, he gets really upset when his brother interrupts, and you know, how to manage that.
I think it's a constant balance, isn't it? And actually, all families with more than one children, to a certain extent, can probably sympathise. I can with three, definitely. So Nicola, how do I know you? I say Nicola, Nicola. How you mentioned before your Facebook group, and we'll put all of this in the show notes, but could you tell people where they can get in touch with you and how they can follow you?
Absolutely. And one thing that I didn't say about, you know, what PDA shows up as is this impulsive behavior. And again, as you know, and you talk about, you know, when someone's feeling anxious or not in control, one of the other behaviors will be to be very impulsive. And what, you know, if that's in gaming, wanting, you know, we've all heard the stories of children that have spent hundreds on a game.
Yeah.
If it's about, you know, literally running out the door to go and get something, which we had to move, whatever it might be, but that impulsivity just takes over. And as we calm and the child feels more in control, or young person, or feels more, there's less demands, we've seen a lot less of that sort of impulsive.
Oh, that's interesting. Behavior. So there are things that people can do. There are things that parents can do if they're experiencing this at home.
Yeah. So absolutely. My website is thepdaspace.com, and it's a word, not, you know, a hyphen or anything, thepdaspace.com. And I have three parts of my business. So I have the annual PDA Summit, which is a global online summit that happens every April. And people can access that through a Facebook group and through my website. And I'm really wanting everybody to learn. So I give all the webinars free for people to watch for 24 hours.
Oh, brilliant.
And then they can buy the back, I call it the back pocket pass, of all the webinars. So this year's people still can purchase, there are over 26 webinars. But I've started a new service because so many parents say, you know, I'm just not sure how to deal with different things. And after creating two summits, I've got such a great contact of wonderful speakers that I'm starting to hold monthly workshops, and I've created it as a subscription because I know what it's like. You see things after the event, or if you're like me, or where was that link, or where was this? So the monthly subscription for the PDA Space portal, and this month we've had Sally Catt, who's an adult autistic PDA, talk about masking. So how our young people may appear in one setting versus at home, and she explains why and how it happens. And I've done it so that they can, you know, if you're a member, you've got 90 days to watch it. Everything's in one place on the website, the Zoom link, and I'm interviewing myself, different professionals. So we've got a private mental health nurse explaining a bit more about how CAMS in the UK works, but mental health. I have interviewed an amazing speech and language therapist, so that will come in November. So it's just a hub to really support families. And the best bit, if people are in the
like-minded
UK,
families.
Yeah.
It can be quite isolating when you're dealing with your own, you know, it can feel like you're the only person dealing with it. And when you meet other people, this is why same thing, I have my group, the Cycle Breaker Parents Unite, because it can feel really lonely when it, you know, in your group of friends, you're the only one who had a tough upbringing, and everybody else, you know, they're not fighting the same things. Well, I imagine, I'm sure it is the same when
it's huge.
Your child has PDA, but nobody around you has that. And then, you know, there's that judgment of strangers. I've even had friends who their son was very tall for his age. So he was actually behaving, you know, he was, say, you know, having a meltdown in Tesco's at age 3, but he was as tall as nearly a 5-year-old, just because his dad is really tall, and that's how he is. And people would say things to my friend, the mom, about how they had to take him in hand and manage him. And that can be really awful if you don't have somebody around you to talk to about it.
What was really difficult for us is my son, his masking was so good that he wouldn't show till literally we were away from school. So everybody was like, but he's so well behaved. And so that double Jekyll and Hyde of us being like, well, no, that's not what we have, and getting to birthday parties, we're always late. The challenges, but yeah, it also means that unlike, it's not going to be like a webinar, people can actually see each other at the end, ask the speaker questions, and be a little bit less formal compared to perhaps the webinar style where you're sort of being spoken to.
Yeah, the passive taker in.
Yeah, and I run it more, as you say, a community, but I also do run a Facebook group as well. That is an ongoing one, as well as the one that is for the summit, where
and we'll put the link in that as well. If you send me the link, we'll put that in the show notes so everyone could just, it's really easy, they can listen to this podcast and go aha, and then click through and join you.
So yeah, and like you, I've got the therapeutic side, so I've got wellbeing courses on my website on, because parents, when their child has got some differences, life can be really, really busy, full on, and have very little time. So I've created a 7-week nurture program that's just about learning to weave well-being in, because that's what we need. And as a solution-focused therapist, which is part of why I've created all this, is I looked at how to create some solutions of what I needed. And
you've walked the path. Who better to ask?
So that's all on my website, thepdaspace.com. Sign up to the emails and newsletters, because then you know, I write, I've got some blogs coming out. I've got blogs already.
Well, I was going to say, do you have anything going on right now? Because it's October now at the time of recording, and my first thought was, I've missed the summit. I guess we could sign up to your email so that we know we'll definitely get an invite. Sign up to the
emails. They can join the portal, which is only £15 a month, with the workshops each month.
Amazing.
There are blogs on the website. There was one aimed for the summer, but you know, anytime, and actually with Christmas coming, or any celebration, about less is more. And I think as parents, we feel, I must put lots in. And actually, for our children with different needs, actually, perhaps one thing, you know, going visiting one shop instead of trying to cram in 3, maybe just 20 minutes doing an outing rather than 2 hours.
So they can enjoy it without, and then calm after.
Absolutely. I was really guilty because it took so long to get out. I was like, well, I'm staying out now because it's taken so long to get out, which was part of the anxiety. Whereas, you know, I've learned so many tools, so it means actually less, and agreeing that with your young people so they understand, we're not, because that's quite scary when we don't know how long, what's the expectation. And yeah, there's I also have a free 7 days of wellbeing tips, so there's lots on my website for people.
I'll put the link into the free thing, and I'm going to sign up to that too.
Please
I think
do.
you might see me in the PDA space. It's just incredible. Nicola, thank you so much for coming on. And as I say, I think that people will be listening to this and going, cha-ching, cha-ching, oh my goodness, that's me. Oh, that's my child. I have that experience too. And I think that in itself, that knowing it's you're not wrong, we're not doing anything wrong. We have the children that we have, and we love the children we have, and there are ways to support them and places where you can go if you don't feel that, say, school, if your children go to school or whatever mainstream area you're in, if you're not getting support, there are places to go. And I think your group is probably the first place to go, isn't it, to seek
that. And the PDA Society, and there is something called EDQ, which is a questionnaire, and that I'll never forget when we did ours, and that's why the PDA Society have the light bulb moment. It's extreme demand questionnaire, and yeah, when we did it, it was just such a moment of, oh my, when, like many others, we kept being told he wasn't autistic. And, you know, parents go around that roundabout with no exits and no support, and being told, no, you know, he's fine, it's you. And actually,
here's another parenting course.
Yeah, PDA is unfortunately not yet in the diagnostic manual, so it becomes a little bit of a hot potato. But yeah, the PDA Society's there, the PDA space, there's a lot of different information. And again, in the portal, we're building up resources to support parents.
Incredible. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you so much for your time. It's just been wonderful interviewing you. Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you so much for your time, Laura. Thank you for bringing me in. Bye.
Bye.